And now time for a book review. Dr. Matete Lerutla has penned a business culture book that promises to inspire, encourage and empower others to sail through worldly doctrines ingrained in organizations and fulfill their purpose, she says, with great candour and insight. Walking in Your Divine Purpose reflects on the unspoken truths of the inside of corporate South Africa, how transformation matters are handled, how leadership behaviour compromises employee well-being and their calling to serve meaningfully. The book is written from the lens of a black female professional with over 18 years of experience in various leadership roles across financial institutions. Dr. Lerutla is a seasoned HR professional and qualified clinical psychologist. She joins us now from Cape Town to talk a little bit more about the book. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Dr. Lerutla. Let's first start with what inspired the book? What made you think it's time for South Africa to read something about some of the subjects that I've just teased out?
Thank you, Tsepiso, for having me, and good evening to your viewers. I think firstly, let me just sketch the context that South Africa is dominantly a society that associates with the Christian denomination. Yet a lot of people find themselves operating in organizations whose culture is really providing paradoxical and somewhat schizophrenic, context within which people are supposed to be operating. I have observed throughout my 18-year stint in corporate South Africa how people tend to lose their souls, in the interest of climbing the corporate ladder. I've seen how people compromise their identity for them to have a sense of belonging. I have experienced and also witnessed how leadership behavior would actually destroy talent and capability as opposed to nourishing and empowering people. I've also seen how leaders will really throw each other under the bus, instead of embracing the reality that we've got diverse talent and capabilities. So with the set insights that I have observed, in my stint in corporate South Africa, I've always had a passion and a desire to see every person being empowered and enabled to walk in the fullness of their purpose based on, the gifts and talents, that they were born with. I've always had a passion of making sure that people are empowered, and this book does exactly that. It gives people tools to navigate the corporate environment without them really losing a sense of who they are.
So we'll get to the tools in just a moment, but you said you have experienced and observed people who have lost their, I'll couch in this way, principles and values, or even if it is their stated objective, leaders who've destroyed rather than nourish. Are you able to share some of the examples of that?
Look, it's quite general. It's general, Tsepiso. I mean, I've personally been exposed to environments where, despite the fact that some of the people would be identified as successors, in corporate South Africa, when it comes to positions that are being open or vacant, people are either booted out of the organization or they're not given those, those opportunities. So there is a lot of the unspoken codes that happens in corporate South Africa that deprives people the opportunity to really walk in to really walk in the purpose that they're supposed to be walking in. So there's many examples that I can cite or that are cited in the book that really shows some of the experiences that people go through.
Okay, I'd like you to touch on that because we want to understand the lens from which the book is written and how those who've read it before have received it, as you've mentioned, that it may appear as if it's dealing with one particular topic, but which you say people have received as universal. So if you could just give us some examples of some of these things that you talk about, even if you borrow from your own experience, because one would say if you talk about purpose from a personal point of view, naturally if you go out and look for a job and it's not a matter of desperation, you want it to align, but corporate culture, as you say, is dynamic. So it may contradict some of those issues.
So the reality is that much as organizations have got a purpose, it's my belief that people are commissioned in different organizations to serve the purpose of organizations. So we tend to always look at purpose from the lens of what the organization is. When people go into a corporate environment, you are in a corporate environment with a role, but the corporate environment creates or provides a platform, or it should actually provide a platform for you to be able to serve your purpose. So it's not necessarily contradictory. We just need to understand that people are commissioned in different areas to be able to serve the purpose of the broader organization, because they come with different skills. But if the organization is not going to enable people to do that which they're supposed to be doing, for example, you might find that there are people that would want to challenge the status quo in an organization that prides itself for leading with integrity. So if there is a sense of integrity that is not observed, by the employees, and employees want to challenge that, they should be allowed to challenge that because it's part of their core, it's part of their purpose. But what I find is that a lot of people tend to walk on eggshells. A lot of people are not able, to challenge and walk in their purpose because of fear of repercussions, should they challenge those things. And it's quite contradictory for me in a sense that we have a social environment, as I say, where we associate with a Christian denomination. Just as an example, with 82% of the society associating with a Christian denomination, yet we find that on the issue of transformation, 30 years down the line, we're still experiencing, or we're still talking about issues of diversity and inclusion. So clearly something is amiss, something doesn't make sense. So I think the book really brings to the surface some of those things that are observed. I talk in the book about issues of artificial Black inclusion. So the appointment of senior Black people in a corporate environment cannot be a quota number. It cannot be a quota thing. It cannot be solely to achieve the scorecard. It's beyond the scorecard. People are there with capabilities. People are there, to serve their purpose, and people are there because they are competent. So I think those are some of the things that are being experienced in a corporate environment. And unless we get to a point of surfacing these things and talking about them, we will unfortunately not get to a point where we really fully contribute to the true reformation and transformation of our society at large.
What are some of the tools that you recommend? Because I'm just thinking, as we're talking about there, the unspoken truths about corporate SA, one would say in some cases they're inconvenient truths when you talk about representativity at a broad level. We know from the perspective of a Black woman, patriarchy is still a thing. There are companies who talk about the fact that their policies ensure that there's inclusivity, but there is still racial undertones or subliminal racism in their unofficial policies. There are so many other things which could be seen as career-limiting moves when you stand up and speak about that. The lack of parity, for instance, between colleagues who do the same thing, but the favoritism spreads even to remuneration, some of these issues.
Yeah, Tepi, so you are quite right. I think the disparities in corporate South Africa really is it's a perpetuation of the unfortunate apartheid system that we have come through as a society, and those things are unfortunately not spoken about publicly. I mean, from some of the people that have earlier reviewed the book had indicated that a brave move from my side, because these are the things that they talk about, in corridors, but they're not able to bring into the boardroom. And the reason primarily is corporate environment has managed to use COVID strategies to make sure that people are not able to speak openly about these type of things. And I think some of the things is that the corporate system has also, from a Black person perspective, they had also managed to make sure that they continue perpetuating the social divide or the racial divide and the ethnic divide between Black people, where they cannot trust one another, and issues around everyone is looking out for themselves. So I think the perspective that I've taken in the book is, despite the challenges that people are exposed to, it is quite important that you remain anchored in who you are. And some of the tools or skills and wisdom that I'm sharing in the book are really aimed at making sure that people don't lose their soul. They don't lose the focus on why they are commissioned in corporate South Africa.
I'm sure it's a book many would like to get a hold of and learn from. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Matete Lerutla, who is a seasoned HR professional and qualified clinical psychologist, sharing with us the contents of that book. It's called Walking in Your Divine Purpose. The book reflects on the unspoken truths about corporate South Africa.